and welcome back to Cuckoo for Books. My name is Salva and I have been waiting all year to do this video. Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys my favorite books of 2020. So I was really happy with my 2020 reading year because I feel like this is the first year since 2016 that I was actually able to read. And I know you're thinking, what do you mean you read every year? You literally post every year, every week that you're reading a book. But I think for 2018 and 2019, because I was busy with a lot of things and I wasn't as fast a reader, I really prioritized books that were part of a series that I was already reading or authors that I already knew I loved. But obviously my 2020, like your 2020, has been completely different from previous years because I have more time, because we're all in quarantine. I've been able to sort of branch out in terms of what I read more. Of course, I still read a lot of young adult, but I think this year more than most years I've been able to be like, oh, I'm gonna try reading that. Maybe this author who I've always been curious about, I'm gonna check her out. So I have 10 books on this list, 5 of which are backlog titles, aka they were published before 2019, 2020. What year is it? Backlog titles which were published before 2020 and 5 titles that were published in 2020 in the middle of this crazy pandemic. Let's get into this list. I know that's why you clicked on this video. Have I been talking too long? Once again, yes I have. You don't have to tell me that. Let's do this. My favorite release of 2020 would be The Cousins by Karen M. McManus. This is the story of 3 cousins. They belong to the Story family. Now the Story family lives on this tiny little island. They own a resort there. They're stinking rich, but their grandmother 20 plus years ago disowned all their parents and never told them why. She just kicked them off the island. Goodbye and good riddance. These 3 cousins, years later, present day, they receive a letter from that same grandma saying, spend the summer with me on this mysterious little island at my resort. And they're like, what is going on? Why are you reaching out to us after all these years? And their parents are like, guys, go. Maybe we can win our inheritance back. Everything I could possibly say about this book I have said in my book review, which I will leave up top. But I love how the author lets you solve the mystery alongside her protagonist. The plotting and the pacing of the story is really well done. This was one of my last reads for 2020, believe it or not, and I'm really happy that it came when it did, and it's just really my favorite release of this year. Another book I really enjoyed this year, and this has been on my TBR for like the last 3 years maybe, and I finally read it this year. It is Alison Ware's Anne Boleyn, A King's Obsession. This is book 2 of her 6 Tudor Queen series. Anne Boleyn is wife number 2. Honestly, this is one of my favorites this year just because the last 2-3 Tudor era properties that I've consumed in terms of TV shows or movies or books, I've been so disappointed by. I've watched The Spanish Princess, which is one of my favorite TV shows, in season 1, and then I started season 2 and I'm like, so I was so disappointed. I was like, no, I'm just gonna run to the comforts of Alison Ware. First of all, because she is an acclaimed Tudor historian. It just felt so safe and secure knowing that an author wouldn't disappoint me with poor historical inaccuracies or storytelling choices. Just the comfort I felt at reading this makes it one of my favorites for this year. Another favorite I had that came out in 2020, and I know a lot of people might have this on their lists too, it is Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno-Garcia. Thank you for giving me endless sleepless nights, book. Pat pat. This is a story about this girl. She's a socialite and she gets a letter from her cousin saying, I'm going crazy, there's weird stuff in the letter. She feels like she's not herself. She recently married into this English family that had migrated over to Mexico, and the socialite's dad is like, no, go check on your cousin. I'm sure she's fine. She's just being dramatic. Just make sure she's okay. You know, she's not actually causing trouble for our family name. The socialite goes, and obviously when she goes up into the mountains in that creepy manner, creepy things happen. I went into this book completely blind. Like, I didn't know what we were dealing with. Were there actual supernatural things at play? All I knew was, and people kept tweeting about it, everyone who read this afterwards was just like, I don't want to eat mushrooms anymore. Gotta say, I haven't looked at a mushroom the same way since finishing this book. The payoff of this book isn't quite as horror and scary as you would expect, but oh my goodness, if she didn't build up the atmosphere. Like, first 100 pages, nothing really overtly creepy happens, but already I couldn't sleep at night and you were just like, something's wrong, I just can't tell what it is. And if this didn't quite deliver in terms of like outright jump scares, it definitely delivered with the suspense and the tension that the author crafted. The next book is also general fiction. I said I didn't do a book review of this because there are 1,000,001 book reviews of this out on the internet telling you how good it is. So you don't need to take my word for it in terms of finding a book review, but it does make its way on this list, and it is Madeline Miller's Circe. Madeline Miller's prose is beautiful. I could go and give you a million synonyms, but it's beautiful, period, full stop. You should read it just for that, even if you're not into Greek mythology. This is obviously about Circe, the witch goddess. I mean, it's quite a bittersweet tale, but why in my mind's eye do I think of it as this warm, golden story? It's weird, and I think it comes down to how beautiful Madeline Miller's writing is. Not giving any spoilers away, there was this whole mother-child scene. Even if I am not a mother myself, I still felt everything that the mother in the book felt. The joy and the sorrow, I felt it, and it brought me to tears. I could talk for 5 more minutes praising this book, but anything I could say has already been said like tenfold through all its awards, its reviews. Every single bit of praise towards this book is definitely well deserved. The next book that is a favorite that was a 2020 release is Keeping Miss Kalila by Tyra Frejas. This is a romance class novel. It's a story about this woman named Kalila who decides to have her own kids. She decides to be a single mother, go it alone. A blast from the past comes along in the form of Datu Alves. It's a second chance romance. It's so pure and happy and good. I was reading it when quarantine was starting to feel weird. This was about May or June. It was starting to get on people's mental health, mine included. And then this book came along like a beautiful ray of light. It cheered me up, and not just because it was a romance. Like, obviously the Kalig factor was there to cheer me up. It's this little tiny family happening right before your very eyes. It was literally a story about bringing new life into the world, and I needed it most when I got to read it, and I will forever be grateful for that. This was the first book out of all 10 that I decided would make it on my list for this year. That was a 2020 release, and then now we're gonna go into a backlog title. It is Obsidio, the third Illuminate Files book by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. So this is a sci-fi book, and the way it's told is in epistolary form. Every time I say that this book is told in epistolary form, I always get a little giggle out of it. Epistolary. That means it's not only told in chapter form, but also in like fake file forms. You've got emails, you've got plans of the spaceship. It's told in fun form, basically. This is the last book in the Illuminate Files series. I have been putting this off for forever because I have this thing about ending series. I don't want to do it. I'm always in denial. And also, of course, there's always the fear that it doesn't end properly. Game of Thrones season 8. I still kind of want to do a book review of this, so I'm gonna leave my thoughts for that. But it could not have ended better. This was what Allegiant and Mockingjay were trying to be. So with the Hunger Games, it was cool. It was amazing. It was something we'd never seen before. Of course, aside from Battle Royale. But that's for another day. But then Catching Fire came along, and it was like Hunger Games, but bigger, better, cooler. Obviously, the third book came along. Probably Suzanne Collins was like, well, we can't just make it even bigger, better, cooler. That would be too repetitive. So we gotta think of another way to end this by still including some of the coolness in the first 2 books, but kind of doing its own way. And that, for me, is where Mockingjay kind of failed. I felt like this book was exactly what Suzanne Collins and Veronica Roth were trying to achieve. It is very different from the first 2 books. It is arguably a quieter novel. It's not as bombastic as the first 2 books. If you want big, fun action scenes that take your breath away, you would turn to the first 2 books. But at the same time, this book was able to deliver something of its own. I love that we got to see the points of view of the bad guys in the third book. This book kind of brings home the realities of war on both sides. Really, in war, nobody comes out the winner. You all suffer grave losses. So I love the more quiet, contemplative tone that this book took compared to its predecessors. But being an Illuminate book, there were still exploding spaceships, which made things really cool. With that, we are officially more than halfway through this list. Another 2020 release that I loved is Admission by Julie Buxbaum. This is a YA book about the college admission scandal that happened in the US last year. A lot of high-profile celebrities and public figures were arrested because they tried to bribe their kids' way into college. Honestly, there were so many things I enjoyed about this book. I love kind of ripped from the headlines books, but also I loved how from the off, even the author herself doesn't necessarily take the side of the teen in this book. Honestly, the protagonist of this book is just straight up unlikable. Like, her white privilege is through the roof. But it was also just cool reading about a protagonist who was like, yeah, I'm full on trash. I'm a garbage person. The ending wasn't wrapped up in a nice little bow because that's not how real life works, and this is very much based on real life. It is still satisfying in a way. Genuinely, I was like, this is the first book I'm gonna read because it's short and I need a short book, and who knows if I'll like it. And here it is on my favorites of 2020 list. So I really enjoyed reading this one. So the next book is also a 2020 release, and honestly, before I read The Cousins, this was set to be my favorite release of the year. This one is, you guys know, we all know, let's all say it together, My Calamity Jane by Cynthia Han, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. Yay! Do I really need to talk about this book? I've said it so many times. My Calamity Jane, My Calamity Jane, My Calamity Jane. So this one is a comedic retelling of the historical figure Calamity Jane. It's set in the old Wild West, a setting I never thought I would enjoy, but you know what? I had such a blast with this book. This is their third book in the Lady Janie's trilogy. Every year these books are on my favorite list. It's cute YA fun, and is that not what we are on this channel for? Some cute YA fun, because that's what I'm here for. This one in particular I read while I was in self-quarantine, so it provided some much needed laughs during that lonely time. And now let's move on to the top two. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. You guys already know what it is, probably. I know you know what it is, but I'm still so excited to share it with you guys. My top two favorite reads of 2020 are Fireborn and Mirage. Fireborn is written by Rosaria Munda, and Mirage is written by Sumaya Dowd. Okay, which one do we want to discuss first? Beep boop beep boop boop. Let's talk about this first. Oh goodness, where to begin with this amazing book? It's a Moroccan-inspired sci-fi fantasy that gives off very Princess and the Pauper vibes. There's this young girl, decidedly not royal, and she lives on a teeny tiny planet in this system that has been conquered by the Vathek Empire. And it just so happens that she is identical to the Vathek princess Maram. Because the Vathek conquerors are so reviled by the people they've conquered, the royal court is suddenly like, aha, you look like the princess. You shall be her body double whenever we go out in public. So in case somebody tries to assassinate the princess, guess what? They'll be killing a lowly peasant. It's a lot of court intrigue. It's a lot of fantastic world building. Why is this only a duology is my biggest complaint. I want to see more of this world. I love the world so much. I don't know that there's anything I would change about this book or this story, how it was told, its characterizations, the plot, the pacing. There isn't anything I would change about this book. I love that this is a Moroccan-inspired sci-fi fantasy because it's not all robots and androids and spaceships. There's culture, there's tradition infused in this story. The outfits that they wear in the book aren't usual white spacesuits that you usually see in these kinds of books. It means something to each individual, to each family. The literature they consume, the food they consume, it's also evident of a culture. As I said with Obsidio, I do love a good exploding spaceship story, but I definitely love how this took the sci-fi and like opened up fantasy to it. And also it's purple. Why am I ending it on such a shallow note? I said such lovely things about this book and I'm ending it with, and it's purple, so it's pretty. Be forewarned, anybody who's going to ask me for a YA recommendation for probably the next 6 months or so, I will say this: save yourself the trouble, go get yourselves a copy of this. Don't wait for me to tell you. This is the book that I will recommend that you check out. Or if that day you ask me I'm feeling a little fiery, I will most likely recommend the other favorite book of 2020 I have, and it is, let me reach for it, it is Fireborn by Rosaria Munda. Oh my goodness, this is another book I cannot shut up about. I have done a book review of this, which you can check out up there. What to say about this book? There are dragons. It's based off of Plato's Republic and the Aeneid. Did I mention there are dragons? This is set in a fantasy land called Callipolis, which is based off of the Roman Republic. In this book, the revolution is over and done with. So we have Lee, who used to be a member of the ruling class, and then we have Annie, who used to be a serf, but because it's a republic now, she has risen to the level of dragon rider. It was honestly so entertaining. I loved it so much. This one I think is going to be a trilogy, so I have more books to look forward to. It also has a redesigned cover, which is just glorious. I'm gonna try to put it up here if I can find the new covers. I love the world that the author built. You would think it being a book about dragon riders, it's very cliche YA, right? But I love how it avoids so many YA tropes. There isn't a really big mustache twirling villain. We're already done with the revolution. There isn't really a huge big romance or a love triangle like Mirage. I don't know what I can say to make this book better, you know? Like, I love it exactly as it is, and I can't wait to return to the world of Callipolis when the sequel comes out in March. I am so excited. And with that, I officially wave goodbye to 2020. Can't say that I'm sad to see it go. Although, if I'm being completely honest, there were a couple of opportunities that I had this year that was really cool, but on a whole, bye 2020. You guys can follow me on my other bookish adventures on Twitter and Instagram. I'm both at Cuckoo for Books. Please subscribe and I will see you guys very soon. Bye guys!